Live NFL trivia every Wednesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge for a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. On June 1st, 1980, history was made when the cable news network, better known as CNN, signed onto the air for the first time. The premise behind the station was revolutionary and would change the face of television forever. A 24-hour news station. Instead of just the morning and nightly news shows that you'd see on stations like CBS, ABC, and NBC, you'd be getting the news all the time. And as part of CNN's commitment to having nothing but news all the time, they went heavy on investing in sports. CNN would devote 1 hour of coverage per night, minimum, to sports, with Reese Schonfeld, the president of CNN, saying that one of the big reasons why people would watch CNN over other networks was because they would spend more time on sports. Along with 10 minutes at 6:05, 20 minutes at 7:30, and 30 minutes at 11, you would get a boatload of random sports spots throughout the day. And when you devote all that time to sports, and in particular, sporting news stories, sometimes you're bound to get stuff wrong. Even in an industry like the news, where you have to be accurate, and you can't report things that aren't true, things slip through the cracks every now and then. And man, was that the case here. Because this team right here is the West Virginia Mountaineers. And in 1985, they, along with their fan base and one of the bowl games in particular, got completely screwed over by CNN's reporting. At the end of the year, CNN published a story that led everyone to believe one thing was happening, when in reality, that thing was not true at all. It was completely made up. And to say that there was outrage over this would be a massive understatement. Because this is the story behind what has to be, in the over 40-year history of CNN, the worst moment ever for the network when it came to college football. Before I talk about the absolutely abysmal blunder that CNN made that completely screwed over the entire state of West Virginia, we need some context to understand just how West Virginia was playing. The year is 1985, and for West Virginia, their goal, under the guidance of head coach Don Nehlen, is simple. Make it to a bowl game for the 5th straight season, and extend what has been, by a fairly comfortable margin, the longest consecutive bowl streak in school history. It was definitely going to be a tough task. Unlike previous seasons, there were practically no expectations for West Virginia heading into 1985. They were not ranked inside the top 20 of the AP poll to kick off the new year. And while they received a few votes, they still would have been ranked outside the top 25 if it went all the way up there by that point. They lost a ton of guys from the previous season that led them to a top 20 finish in the coaches poll and a win over TCU in the Astro Bluebonnet Bowl, including starting quarterback Kevin White, starting running back Ron Wolfley, who got drafted in the 4th round of the 1985 NFL Draft by the St. Louis Cardinals, and their top 5 pass catchers in yardage, as Gary Mullen, Willie Drury, Todd Fisher, Rob Bennett, and Wayne Brown were no longer there. For some perspective on how thin they were offensively, their top receiver that was coming back was a man by the name of John Gay, who had 7 catches for 91 yards the previous year, and was a running back. That was the most yards that anyone had in 1984 that was coming back to the team in 1985. So yeah, the expectations were not very high that they could replicate the success that they had throughout much of the first half of the 1980s. However, to the surprise of many people, the Mountaineers were picking up right where they left off. In the 6 games that they played at home, with some of them being against quality competition like Pitt and Virginia Tech, they did not lose a single one. West Virginia only lost 3 games all year, going 7-3-1, and 2 of those losses came at the hands of ranked opponents, when they lost to a ranked Maryland team and a ranked Penn State team. Granted, they got outscored in those games 55-0, but against teams that they were expected to beat, they did that, and then some. No, West Virginia's offense was not great by any means in 1985. They ended the season only averaging a hair over 17 points per game. ranking 91st in Division 1A out of 110 teams, with their leading receiver, Harvey Smith, only having 14 receptions for 273 yards and a touchdown, and their starting quarterback, John Talley, later being converted to a wide receiver, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. But their defense was nothing short of superb. The defense ended the season giving up just 14.4 points per game. In their 9 games against unranked opponents, they allowed an average of just 11.5 points per game, even pitching a shutout against Rutgers during the final month of the year. Their defense kept them in a lot of games. And when the Mountaineers ended the season by winning each of their final 3 games, ending the season on an extremely high note by playing some of their best football of the year, especially defensively, even though they were an independent, meaning that they didn't have any conference tie-ins to a bowl, it seemed like a strong possibility that with their record, they were going to be going bowling. And that's when the Aloha Bowl down in Hawaii came calling. Was West Virginia the Aloha Bowl's first choice? Absolutely not. They were looking at getting Texas to line up against Alabama, but that didn't happen, as they got an invite to the much closer to home and much more lucrative Bluebonnet Bowl. They tried to get a team out of the Pac-10, but that was a giant mess where the top teams were accepting bids to other bowls, and the next rung of teams was all teams that were not very good, and did not have winning records. As Kevin Mulligan, the assistant executive director, said on the Pac-10 and the situation there, it's confusing, and it has been since the beginning. Mulligan flat out said that if they couldn't get UCLA or Arizona State because they accepted bowl bids elsewhere, that they would look at schools like Colorado, Virginia, and West Virginia. And the Pac-10's misfortune and confusion was great news for the Mountaineers, who got the invite to play in the Aloha Bowl, according to CNN. It was going to be West Virginia against Alabama in the 1985 Alamo Bowl. CNN had the scoop, they were on it, and one of their anchors broke the news live on the air. Time to celebrate in Morgantown, time to book those flights to Hawaii, and time to party and get ready for one more game. There was just one small problem. It's a minor nitpick, it's nothing too serious, but there's just one teeny tiny detail that we have to talk about. Oh yeah, West Virginia didn't get invited to the Aloha Bowl. That's right, the entire story was fake. The entire story was a lie. Because as it turns out, the 1985 Aloha Bowl was a battle between Alabama and USC, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. West Virginia was not one of the teams playing in the game, and it's not because they backed out at the last minute or had second thoughts. They flat out never got an invite, and they were never on the radar. Turns out, the only contact that the Aloha Bowl had with West Virginia was a super brief conversation between a bowl official and head coach Don Nehlen. That was it, and at no point during that conversation did anything about being invited to the bowl get discussed. Aloha Bowl spokesman Kevin Mulligan called the fake story by CNN ridiculous, and West Virginia Athletic Director Fred Schaas flat out said, "I have not had any contact with the bowl. I've heard nothing." Which raises the obvious question. How the heck did CNN think that West Virginia was going bowling? Why did they report on this when it wasn't true? And when both sides even admitted that they were super confused, because at no point was this ever really discussed. Well, there was a report from UPI that listed West Virginia as a probable opponent for the Aloha Bowl, just based off of their record, and based on the fact that even though the Aloha Bowl expressed interest in a West Coast team, that they didn't have anyone with a winning record. Keep in mind that from all accounts, this was a probable opponent, not a guarantee, not a lock, and not a confirmation. This was no different than reading an article on ESPN or CBS Sports or any publication for that matter and seeing bowl projections. That's all this was, a bowl projection. And keep in mind that the previous week, along with doing this to West Virginia in the Aloha Bowl, UPI connected West Virginia to a possible spot in the Independence Bowl and the Liberty Bowl. Again, this was nothing more than an educated guess. However, from there, one CNN anchor, during a short break that he had, read the report from The Wire but didn't see the fact that it was merely a projection and a prediction, and instead thought that it was the real deal. The CNN anchor then read the report, broke the news live on the air, and announced to the world that West Virginia would be playing Alabama in the Aloha Bowl. As for the validity of that statement, yeah, it was a complete lie. As Richard Davis, a senior producer at CNN, said on all of this, we were on a commercial break, and one of our anchors was reading the UPI wire when he saw it. We had just come out of our bowl preview, where we had Alabama versus ? So he went on, updated it as we often do, and came on erroneously with what UPI was telling us. We're disappointed that UPI didn't confirm what it was telling us. That's why we pay UPI, to supply us with a credible news service. I love that they're trying to pin this on UPI, as if it's their fault, even though UPI did nothing but run a projection, and run a chart of probable bowl matchups where they asked sports writers who they thought was likely to play in the game. That's like getting mad at Joe Lunardi during March Madness for projecting that a team would be a 3 seed, when in reality, they were a 4 seed. He never reported anything as fact. He merely just predicted and projected what would happen, and you took it the completely wrong way. That's not on him. That's on you. For CNN to blame UPI for making a prediction that they made explicitly clear was a prediction is laughable. And this was especially true when, quite literally, CNN was the only place reporting on this as fact. No other newspaper and no other publication had West Virginia to the Aloha Bowl as a confirmed story. It was strictly CNN that jumped the gun for a few hours before it got retracted. As for how West Virginia and the Aloha Bowl reacted to this, surprisingly enough, everyone was pretty level-headed. They understood that CNN was in a tough spot having to report on news all the time, and they realized that nobody was perfect. It didn't change their perception of CNN in the slightest bit. Sure, it hurt. Of course it hurt. But it couldn't take away the great memories they had all season, and couldn't take away from the— I'm just kidding, they destroyed the ever-loving crap out of the network. When I say that CNN got serious heat for this from just about everyone, from the Aloha Bowl to West Virginia fans and staff members, oh man, I'm not kidding. In the spirit of the holiday season, they got roasted more than chestnuts on an open fire. Fred Schaus, the athletic director at West Virginia, was understandably furious at CNN, saying, I have no idea where that came from. There was never any official contact between us and the bowl. How in the hell these things get started? It's not professional, and it just upsets people. He was even so upset that he contacted CNN directly, to which senior producer Richard Davis said, he said we ought to be more responsible. That kind of thing. I guess we disappointed a few mountaineers. I'll tell you one thing, we found out a lot of people back in West Virginia watched CNN. And Schaus wasn't the only one who was furious at CNN for creating and circulating this lie. He made it very clear that the Aloha Bowl had nothing to do with this, saying, I think the bowl people handled it fine. I don't think it was their fault. Quite honestly, it seems to me to have been rather irresponsible journalism. But the bowl people were worried that this would destroy their reputation, especially since the Aloha Bowl was a super low-rung game that didn't have the best of reputations already. Said an anonymous Aloha Bowl official, we've been fielding calls all weekend from people back in West Virginia. One guy called me at home at 6 o'clock in the morning. It's all a very unfortunate situation, and the less we say about it, the better. We're afraid about what it could do to our reputation. And Steve Kimura, who works for the Honolulu Advertiser, said that he received a call from a West Virginia writer trying to get to the bottom of the situation, saying, he told me they had a ton of fans calling them wanting to know what happened. He said some of the callers were on the verge of tears. So yeah, it was bad. It was really bad. CNN's reputation as a credible news source, when it came to college football, was destroyed. And just about everyone in West Virginia was absolutely furious with the network, and rightfully so. So what's the moral of the story? A prediction is just that. A prediction. It is not final. It is not a done deal. It is not confirmed. It is merely someone projecting what they think is going to happen. Do not report on this as news. Do not report on that as something that is going to happen. And if you're breaking news in front of the entire country, make sure that you actually read the article first before you go on the air and say whatever it is that you're going to say. That's kind of important. Because in 1985, CNN reported that West Virginia was saying aloha to the Aloha Bowl. And as a result, West Virginia fans were saying the other meaning of the word aloha to CNN forever. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.